Francophone versus Anglophone, the compliance gap.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We are all aware that Africa is expanding at a rapid pace, and from an operator point of view, you start quickly realizing that the layer of the land or the environment is far from uniform. You get into one country, things look different, or the regulatory environment is quite different. And this brings us to the topic, Francophone and Anglophone regulatory systems. And I've got the amazing panel here with me, and I'd like them to introduce themselves. And I'm hoping from this topic today, we'll be in a position to explore how, the differences that we see from a regulatory point of view, the legal traditions, look into the regulatory philosophies, and of course, the market structures that come with it. Please, let's welcome our panel, and I'd like them to introduce themselves. My name is Justice, and I look after compliance at SuperSportBet. Please introduce yourselves, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Moustapha Camara, so I come from Senegal. I'm the chairman of the board of directors of the National Lottery in Senegal.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. My name is James Enu from Ghana. I am the Member of Parliament for Tema West, which is in the Greater Accra region of Ghana, and I'm the board chairman for the Gaming Commission of Ghana, and I'm also a legal practitioner. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for welcoming us. My name is Ngabe Franklin. I am an iGaming attorney from Prima Attorneys Law Firm in Cameroon.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Musa Mngadi. I'm the CEO of African Lotteries and Gaming Association. Thank you.
A round of applause for the panel today, and I think let's kick it off, right? Often when operators are looking into starting up their operations across the continent, they talk about entering Africa, right? So this is usually the tagline that you often hear people talking about. And half the time they don't have that perspective, right? So Africa is seen as one jurisdiction, and often people don't understand that you've got, it's like when you are in the US and somebody is asking you about something that is happening in Ghana, as if it's something that you can walk to and things like that. What would you say is the biggest regulatory difference between the Francophone and the Anglophone markets that operators tend to underestimate? And I'd like to look at the legal perspective, and I'd like to direct that to you, Franklin, just to break it down for the people in the room.
Okay, thank you very much, Justice. First of all, Cameroon has a dual legal system. We have the common law and the civil French law. But the predominant law is the civil French law, which are laws borrowed from the Napoleonic era right from France. And the laws applicable to the betting industry is actually crafted from the replica of the Napoleonic law that it applies in France. Yes, so we have the law, which is a law that was promulgated in 2015. Yes, that puts in place gaming industry, that is the game of chance, money games, and online gamings, and with its degree of application that was published in 2019. So basically, you talked of entering. I'm entering into Africa. The entry into Africa, particularly in Cameroon, is possible but cumbersome. Cumbersome, why? Because the paperwork is enormous. The entry fee alone is too high. We are talking of 530,000 USD just for the entry fee. And apart from that, you have the guarantee that you pay, which is almost 200 million francs CFA. So I don't know how much that can be in USD, can be 100 and something in USD. And apart from that, you have compliance that you have to meet with. You have many ministries that intervene in the process. You have the Ministry of Territorial Administration, the Ministry of Trade, the Ministry of Finance for the tax compliance side. So you see, the Francophone regime of regulating gaming industry is very, very, very stringent, very, especially in Cameroon.
Great point. And just to take it away from that, and I'd really like to look at the Francophone regulatory structure, you know, just to feed into what Franklin has just brought in. Moustapha, how do you think that looks like?
Yes, as my colleague just said, you know, Francophone country, we still be in civil law, which is just a Napoleonic code base, which is a prescriptive law, and which means that basically what is not in a decree, which is loi in French, doesn't exist, so it's not allowed. So you can imagine now what that can create it in terms of being bureaucratic, being too formalistic, and if I take an example of Senegal, there is no entry fee, but the licensing process can be very long, often very opaque, and different ministries are involved. So you can say even if there is no entry fee, but there is a cost, because the cost is a waiting time. Yeah, time is money. So that's my take in Francophone in terms of the civil law we have. If I compare to, you know, the Anglophone framework, where it's more kind of pragmatic and based on judicial precedent and principles. I think in Nigeria, in Ghana, the licensing process is much clearer, open very fast, even if there is most of the time an entry fee. So you can compare, you know, one side you have the time, the licensing cost is the time you waste, waiting, the time you're waiting, and in the other side you have the Anglophone, more pragmatic, quicker, faster, but usually there is an entry fee, and also, you know, the taxation code is very likely to change more often than in a Francophone. That is my take and my experience that I have in Africa.
Awesome. Honorable Enu, like, what is your view, just following on to that, if you look at it from the opposite?
Yeah, thank you very much. And like you rightly said, the environment, the gaming environment is very, very fragmented. And this fragmentation has basis in the Anglophone, Francophone dichotomy. And indeed, I think this has a lot to do with the legal heritage or legal traditions of these two systems. Of course, when we speak about the Anglophone countries, they have a more rigid system, codified, detailed procedurally, and all that. But compared to the Anglophone countries, we run with a system where we call the case law or precedents, and it's a bit more flexible. So for instance, if you come to Ghana, case law also guides, you know, processes that lead to acquiring a license. For instance, if there has been a decision regarding the suitability of a shareholder, that serves as a precedent in guiding future scenarios that are similar to what transpired in the court. So these are part of the reasons why there are two different traditions when it comes to the regulations and all that. Of course, when it comes to the legal basis as well, in the Anglophone countries, you know, interpretation of the rules and the regulations are more purposive. They look at the intent of the lawmakers. They look at what the law is intended to achieve, rather than looking at it in a literalistic manner, looking at it specifically as to what the law is saying. But in Anglophones, we look more of the purposive approach. And that is why our system is a bit more flexible, and we have adopted a system where we walk you through the process. But in the Anglophone, in the Francophone, what I've seen is that if the procedure is set that you have to provide ABC document, and you have to go through ABCD process, if you falter with one, you are disqualified. But with the Anglophone, we will walk you through. When even along the line, we engage in dialogue. We guide you and take you through the process. And that is one of the reasons why probably the process is shorter, especially when it comes to the Anglophone countries. Of course, this all dovetails also into issues of language, because when you speak about English language is more flexible. It gives more room for interpretation. But when it comes to French, it is very restrictive. And that has also created that kind of differences. And indeed, if you look at the enforcement culture, there are two different ball games when it comes to Anglophone and Francophone. Like my brother rightly said, in the Francophone countries, enforcement is very, very strict.
Yeah.
Very, very strict. So this has contributed to the differences as far as the two regimes are concerned.
Very interesting point from a regulatory centralization point. Musa, you traverse or you look at, the overall industry association across the continent. It would be very interesting to hear your views from an industry association overview.
Well, when it comes to the legal framework of each jurisdiction, I feel like compliance is something that is required, and it all has its level of cost. And yes, it does take certain stages to get to the end goal, which is your licensing. But I need you to understand that you need to respect each jurisdiction for what they are trying to achieve. And whether it's Anglophone or Saxophone, it literally doesn't matter. There's compliance, and it's just the way the compliance is actually just being administrated. And yes, it boils down to the legal framework of how those procedures are done. When it comes to the Francophone environment, I don't know how to speak French, so I can't mention, I can't go into depth in terms of how the interpretation of the law is. But when it comes to the Anglophone aspect of it, South Africa is strong on the Roman Dutch law, and that's basically what we work on. So it works on what we inherit in terms of the structures of our laws, and that is what we have to respect going forward. There are obviously ways that we can improve those processes, and those are things that we need to look into in terms of, as an association or as regulators. How do we improve the entrance to the market?
Great. I think, that brings us now to a very interesting element of this conversation, and it takes us to the licensing and market entry, right? So a lot of you have touched on the complexities in the different regulatory structures. Mustafa, people talk about, the lotteries' historical play, from a central role, especially around Senegal, right? How would you advise an operator thinking about market entry into a Francophone, in your view? I'm just trying to make it easier for the panel just to, have a view on that.
Yes, so Senegal specifically, so there is no, as we say, Francophone, because the law is prescriptive and a lot of things is in the decree. If it's not in the decree, it's not allowed. You have to make sure that you fill all the boxes in terms of document you have to provide. In Senegal, there is no entry fee, but as I say, the process can be very bureaucratic, administrative. So the cost is more. The barrier, I would say, is administrative barrier. So you have to go through a lot of, processes, and meet maybe ministries and so on. In terms of, but there is something that I want to add, and it's very important in Francophone. I think that I'm not aware the Anglophone side, they have that. In Francophone, we have what we have, which we call OHADA. I don't know if you have heard about it. It's the Organization for the Harmonization of Business Law, which includes 17 African countries, all sharing the same, French legal heritage. So what does it mean? It means that expanding, if you have a license in Senegal, if you are already operating in Senegal, expanding from Senegal to Dakar to Abidjan is quite straightforward because it is the same commercial laws, it is the same corporate structure, the corporate structure is identical, and it is also the same for debt recovery, etc., etc., etc. So it's the same commercial law across all these 17 Francophone African countries. And I think that should reduce normally the compliance cost to expand, regional expansion if you want to. I think that is something that this HOADA is that I've been talking to ministers because I've been lobbying about it, and I'm saying that we have something, we have HOADA, and which is about business law. It's a blueprint. Let's leverage on OHADA. Let's leverage OHADA and make it include the gaming side, the regulating gaming side, across all these 17 countries, because we already have a good basis, I think, which is OHADA. And I think that is something that is African Francophone has, and I'm not aware about this unified commercial code on Anglophone side.
Yeah. Okay. No, a great point. I wanted to get to Franklin about this in terms of, the barriers to entry on the issue. But maybe before I even get to you, let me get to Honorable Enu here to just give us the structure from a regulatory model point of view. How what are the learnings that you think can be taken out of that?
Thank you very much. In Ghana, we have the Gaming Act of 2006. That is Act 721. And that is the act that regulates gaming activities in terms of licensing and all that. One of the major things that the act stipulates has to do with qualification to be able to acquire a license. So our regime is such that a fully owned foreign entity cannot acquire a license in Ghana. So that is also a hurdle. What you need to do is to partner with locals. So you either have some foreign partners with some other local shareholders or a fully local owned company. Mm-hmm. So there is a qualification hurdle right there. So once you want to enter into the market, you need to partner with a local person. That is one. Now, the other thing is that the shareholders must also meet certain criteria. Of course, we'll do the due diligence in terms of your integrity, in terms of the soundness of your financial background and all that. And Ghana, we have not been on the gray list of FAFT before. So if we have operators originating from our neighboring countries, for instance, if you look at Cote d'Ivoire is on the gray list of FAFT. Yeah. Recently, Burkina Faso exited, but Cote d'Ivoire is still on it. So if you have operators coming from some of these countries, we enhance our due diligence because we want to be sure that they comply with the necessary rules and regulations. So these are some of the hurdles that comes as far as qualifying even to acquire license, entering the market in Ghana is concerned.
I think that takes us to that interesting point on the barriers, right? Musa, let's look at the cost of compliance. And when we come from your point, I'd like to take you to the barriers of entry, Franklin. I'm just worried about the time, and this conversation can drag us the whole day. Thoughts on the between the two of you, gentlemen? Let's just deal with the elements of cost of compliance.
Yeah.
Your view.
The cost of compliance will always be high in any business. And another thing that we need to understand that what we are doing is you are trying to get into a business of gambling. We are not building bridges. We are not building clinics or infrastructure. This is a gambling industry. So you need to understand that the attitude towards this industry is, it's not a positive attitude, even from a statutory or law system. So in so saying, the cost for entrance and compliance will be high. We can't just have anybody entering a system where it's a sector that deals specifically with gambling. And you know, in the earlier panel, they were talking about responsible gambling, and responsible gambling is a framework that goes into the cost of compliance. It's one of the things that is fundamental in terms of why the cost of compliance in gambling is so high, is the responsible gambling aspect of it. So the cost of compliance and the barriers will exist because of the nature of the business that we are in.
Franklin, your thoughts on that? Just, and I want you to just bring in the elements of barriers and just try and tie the cost elements to it.
Okay, barriers, you know, I won't really say there's a barrier because it's just compliance. There are rules put in place. Once you comply to those rules that are put in place, there shouldn't be any reason for a barrier. And you know, we're talking about gambling here. I mean, the nature of the business itself is not something that is easily culturally accepted within the African society. Mm-hmm. So that is why you see most states put in compliance rules that are really, really, really strict and are really, 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 let me say, down to the core, because they really want to know how you carry out that activity. So the compliance is true, it is costly, but it is to put it in such a way that there is responsible gaming within the industry, and also to fight, as we know, against money laundering and fighting terrorism. Yeah. So the cost for the compliance is there, but it is worth it because the market is also there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that is what I think about that.
Yeah, so the biggest touch point from an African point of view, right, has been the issue of responsible gaming and player protection, right? And maybe I'll take this one to Honorable Enu. Is there a balance? Do we see the balance? Industry growth versus consumer protection. Are we doing enough from a regulatory point of view?
Thank you very much. I think that responsible gaming is a very critical matter that industry players, stakeholders must take a very important look at. And it's indeed, for me, I believe that we should engage in a lot of collaboration, a lot of data sharing, because for instance, if somebody is on a ban list in South Africa and the person travels to Ghana, how is Ghana able to determine that that person is on a ban list and therefore he will not be permitted to engage in gaming activities? Yeah. So it's important for us to collaborate. It is important for us to build data so that we can disseminate intelligence across board as easily as possible, so that all of us will be on the same page, all of us will be well informed. I believe that once we do that, issues of responsible gaming and all that will be a thing of the past. The collaboration and then sharing of data is very key in this direction.
And I like that you bring in that element of data sharing across jurisdictions. And I don't know if this is where we all come together, you know, and I'd like to get everyone's, you know, short view on this one. If I was to throw 5 years at you, and I say, what do you think is going to be the biggest regulatory shift in the African continent? Musa, how do you see that?
Well, we are already working on harmonizing in terms of standards. Okay. We are actually bridging the gap in terms of how administration is done through Anglophone and Francophone. The difference is not there. It's more like the attitude in terms of how things are actually, you know, administrated.
So it's an attitude approach.
Not necessarily just attitude. Okay. I'm just saying how things are just administrated differently. So in terms of the next 5 years, we are looking at a very, very close-knit, well-regulated African continent where the gaps and specifically illicit trade will be reduced dramatically. I think the focus has been put on how much we are actually bleeding in terms of funds out of the continent. And there's a consensus now with regulators as a whole that, this is what we need to step into, putting in the necessary measures. Especially that's the reason why you see so many states looking at tax regimes and how to generate revenue within those states. So it's very important that we get that data sharing and we actually cross-share that information so that we can get a continental framework that's workable for everyone.
Okay, great stuff. So I think we are out of time, and I'd have really liked to get everyone's opinion in terms of how that 5 years really looks like. And the producers are already buzzing me up and getting. Okay, yeah. Okay, so I think there we have it, ladies and gentlemen. It is quite clear. The landscape in Africa is quite complex. It's quite broad, right? It's not just about the licensing elements, right, that people tend to see as a thing. We've got the legal traditions, right? We've got the regulatory relationship management that needs to be brought into place, and purely to understand the local market structures. And I think this is the takeaways that we need to be taking away from this panel. And ladies and gentlemen, please join me in thanking the panel, and thank you very much for the insights. Say that again? Oh, we still have a minute. Okay, I'll give you, each and every one of you, like 5 seconds just to close it out then. Okay, the 5 seconds is gone. Okay, they're still there? Okay.
Yeah, yes, just, no, not 5 seconds, but maybe 1 minute. So just to the point. So I want to say something here, because we talk about a lot about responsible gaming and bridging gap between Francophone and Francophone and Anglophone. And I think maybe, for me, it just may be a discussion that's not bringing too much to Africa in terms of where we're going forward for regulation. One simple truth for all regulators around the world is you cannot regulate what you cannot see. And I think that if you go here and everybody know that about the truth, that you cannot regulate what you cannot see, and we will be in a better place in 5 years' time. What that mean? It means that the real gap is not about more legislation. The real gap for me is one of visibility and data. So now, only data for me, real feed. So that's what I'm advocating in Senegal and also in other Francophone countries. Put into place the tools to collect data and have real feed. That real feed for me is the only one that is going to bridge this gap, to transcend language, legal heritage, and so on and so on. When operators not move from reactive position to a proactive position, we'll bridge the gap. And for that, we will need data. Data is key for here. So we need to harvest the maximum data. We need to mine the data. And when we're talking about player protection, most of the time also we mix it up with, illegal gambling and et cetera, et cetera. And I think it's completely different. For me, player protection is the data you get and be proactive, talking to those players who are at risk and tell them, why, guys, your behavior is taking you to an addiction state. Stop playing, play more or less. This is player protection. And after now, you talk about illegal gambling. And I think that since I'm here this morning, I heard about a lot of mix between player protection, illegal gambling, extra cross-border, and so on. But player protection starts first, having the data and being able to be proactive and talking to those players who are at risk and making sure they know their behavior is dangerous, who's at risk, and gives them the support they need. Driving them to the center, because we have centers that look after addict people. That's, for me, what we should be, where we should be in 5 years' time. Thank you very much.
I think that sums it up for everyone. Thank you so much.